Hello. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to say welcome to the first event of CAS Ethiopia-AU office for the year 2023. Because I'm speaking English, I'm using the European calendar, so my Ethiopian brothers and sisters, forgive me. We're very happy to see you here today. I see so many familiar faces, but also new faces. But to all of you, I want to say thank you very much for making time and joining us to kickstart our activities for the year. Looking back at the past year, 2022, I would like to say, or I want to say it was quite an eventful year, locally, continentally, and globally. So locally, of course, we've had the conflict, the internal conflict that we had for over a year. Continentally, we've had continued unconstitutional change of government. And then globally, we've had the Ukraine war that has impacted every corner of the globe. But then I mentioned all the negative things that happened in the world. Also positive things happened. In Ethiopia, we've had a peace deal agreement that's been signed between the federal government and TPLF, which I would say marked the end of the war, which is good news for the country and for everybody who's been affected by the war. Continentally, I want to say congratulations to all Africans and all Africans who trade, for all other people who trade with the continent, because we've kickstarted a trading under the AFCFTA to guided trade initiatives, which is a huge success to the continent. And then one great thing that has happened globally is we've almost got close to kicking the pandemic. I will try to be, oh, okay. So today we're here to kickstart our activities for 2023 with discussing pressing global issues. Some I mentioned now, but then much more that I've not mentioned through the panel discussion we will have. So we've invited very capable and able panelists with different backgrounds, such as traders, politicians, youth representatives, to speak on this global pressing issues and try to find some answers for these issues that I've just mentioned and beyond. So to walk you a bit through the agenda, we will start with a keynote speech by His Excellency Ambassador Eshete Tilahun, who's the Director General for the European and American Affairs within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Following his keynote remarks, we will go straight into the panel discussion that will be moderated by CAS country representative, Mr. Benno Müchler, and one of our brilliant CAS scholarship holders, Ms. Jerusalem Bekele. Following the panel discussion, we'll hear again from Mr. Benno Müchler to make closing remarks. Then before we all part ways, I kindly invite you to a reception that we have organized as a closing to this event. But today it will be a little bit more special because this ceremony will also be used to say farewell to our dear country representative, Mr. Benno Müchler, who will also be leaving us very soon. Yes, so we'll want to say goodbye and see you soon during this event. So without taking much more time, I want to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Eshete Tilahun to make his opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hiwote. Guten Abend, everybody. I think I need to observe some protocols because my oversight principal is here. Honorable Dr. Dima Negewo, Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Foreign Relations and Peace Affairs, House of Peoples, representatives of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Excellency, my brother, Ambassador Assoumani, Ambassador of the Union of Comoros. Excellency Ato Masambet, country representatives of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to start my brief remarks by expressing sincere thanks and appreciation to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Office to Ethiopia and the African Union Commission, both for the invitation and organizing this timely session on such topical issue. The 21st century challenges and the human potential, it goes like that, a very long title. As we embark on the new year 2023, it is indeed nice to take stock of what has transpired last year, what lessons were drawn, and we need to establish trends and charter a new way forward for upcoming engagements. I trust a lot would be discussed on the issue of leadership and social values, which are fundamental in our quest for transformation and development. What Africa needs to emphasize in the promotion of interest of its citizens relate to these important factors. We unfortunately are locked, as you know, on the receiving end of values that Africa cannot digest easily. I cannot go to that detail now, but with this in mind, let me specifically highlight the context of evolving landscapes of international relations on the diplomatic engagements of Ethiopia, including lessons from 2022 and hopes or expectations during 2023. In fact, I will talk about this in the context of the African continent. What has transpired since the night of 3rd November 2020, following the unfortunate attack on our national defense forces, exceptionally, Ethiopia has passed through a challenging time. At the same time, the international community was also struggling to pass the test posed by the COVID pandemic. For us, the war in the north, the drought in different parts of the country, the impact of the global economic downturn that followed the COVID pandemic and the impact of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia posed compounded challenges. Simply put, we run into peace and security, information and cyber security, innovation and technologies, and environmental challenges. I trust going forward we still face much of these variables, even in the context of the year ahead. In that regard, if I may say few lines on each. On ensuring peace and security at home and internationally, it has remained a major challenge for everyone in this continent, every member of the African Union, if I exaggerate a bit. In this regard, the war in northern part of Ethiopia was major setup for us. However, the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement between the government and the federal government and the TPLF on the 2nd November 2022 in Pretoria, and the subsequent agreements that follow significantly broaden the prospect for peace in Ethiopia. This agreement has multidimensional significance. I hope you agree with me, not just for Ethiopia, but the region and the continent as well. Putting an end to the active conflict has silenced the guns and proved that Africa can indeed find solutions to its own problems. In 2023 and beyond, strengthening existing mechanisms for peaceful resolutions of conflict in Africa should remain our priority. Inclusion and participation of significant portions of the society in the context of Africa, whose number accounts close to 60% or more, within the range of the young age. It is important that leadership in this continent would involve to ensure sustainable peace in the continent. To this end, the issue of youth has received greater attention in Ethiopia, and we have implemented policies that support youth, including the establishment and implementation of the national youth policy. At least we have promising principles that would guide the commitment needed from the government and the public. The second point on external pressure and negative media campaigns that shape narratives in Africa, which has an impact on the performance of economic sectors such as tourism. It is important to note that it's not only conflict that destroys the livelihood and physical infrastructure, but also the software in our mind, which has its impact in terms of communication, miscommunication, which is very sensible to trade, investment, and development assistance, for which the continent is much hungry to see. Misinformation through social media and mainstream media played part in many conflicts, including ours, and the scores of activities, particularly in the areas of rehabilitating, staggering recovery from COVID, been affected in my view. I believe the issue of narratives and building partnership to mitigate the negative impact of communications and effects related to information cyber security would be an important endeavor for all of us. My third point will be on the technology and the innovation front. In Ethiopia and at the level of Africa, we need to make utmost effort in the areas of capacity building to unlock available potentials. There is a need to recognize new niches of industries, leverage unique African advantage, and invest in the youth, entrepreneurial populations. Collaboration across stakeholders and providing adequate leadership to achieve sustainable, inclusive growth is not an option for Africa, to say the least. Given the significant gaps in technologies, Africa needs to improve its infrastructure and prepare the young workforce for new competitive endeavors. It will be a plus to think the future of Africa depends on success in this endeavor. Individual countries like Ethiopia alone can't do it, but as a continent, we can make progress together. Without technology, abundance, scarcity, development, backwardness, governance, communications, what have you, would not work. So it is time for Africa to prioritize the issue of technology and innovation. And I can't say the kickstart year is 2023, but the focus needs to lie on that. My last point is with respect to foreign policy dispensations. The AU is a platform where we can share the promotion of Pan-African values, and at the center of our diplomacy lies the issue of Pan-Africanism, and Ethiopia will not be any different. We need to garner global support for our initiatives such as infrastructure, connectivity, and the promotion of the African continental free trade area, which are aiming to open a new chapter for the transformation of African economies and development agenda. But we will always find it's not an easy endeavor, garnering real partnership in that. You know, the type of promises entered for Agenda 2030. We know the global promises on climate change. Nothing will be so special and different for Africa in that regard, and it is a difficult endeavor. The landscape for partnership is difficult, we understand, but we always find routes to navigate through joint efforts. We must own our problems and then take responsibility as the center, however. On what we do on bilateral level and collectively in the African Union level would definitely have to highlight what I said. In the nutshell, our priorities, our efforts must focus on the issue of climate change, on the issue of addressing the global economic downturn, where Africa is also paying the dearest price in that, and managing intra and inter-African conflicts would be, in fact, with a reverse count, our first priority. We also need preparedness to utilize the capability of our youth, their innovative experiences, and to develop locally grown knowledge for the transformation of the continent. I think the general perspective as the master of ceremony indicated, are not easy, but everything is not gleam. With this, I wish to expect more exchange during the panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Eshete. And now I would like to invite all our panelists to join us here on the stage. I will free the staircase in a moment. It's such a big panel that we block now the road to it, but you will not escape. You have to join us here now. So please join us, all our panelists, and then we can start our discussion. Yeah, Dr. Dima, Your Excellency, please join us. Ambassador Eshete, Dr. Friedrich, Excellence Mondoha, Ms. Bitania, and I think, yeah, President Mezembet, I see her there, pre-seating, as you would say. Join us here, and then we will join us and frame you with our chairs. Yeah, perfect. Do we have enough microphones? Maybe we can ask the technical team here to have a few more. I'm taking the risky chair here at the edge. I hope there will be no accident. Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Jerusalem, one of our scholarship holders here. And we would like to briefly introduce our esteemed panelists here. Thank you very much for joining us. Interesting discussion ahead. And yeah, I would like to start to introduce once again His Excellency Ambassador Eshete. You are a career diplomat in Ethiopia. You are currently the Director General for European and American Affairs at the Foreign Ministry. You had a previous role as the head of the economic section at the Ethiopian Embassy in Berlin. And you also before worked as Minister Counselor of the mission of Ethiopia to the United Nations. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. Actually, it's good afternoon. I'll be introducing His Excellency Ambassador Mondoha, Ambassador of the Union of Comoros, Ambassador to Ethiopia and African Union, was the African Director at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Comoros. His Excellency has been already Ambassador to Ethiopia from 1997 up to 2004. Thank you for coming.
And we continue with the Honorable Dr. Dima Negewo, Standing Chairperson of the Committee on Foreign Relations and Peace Affairs in the House of Peoples Representatives here in Ethiopia, which is the lower chamber of the Ethiopian Parliament. Honorable Dr. Dima is an independent member of the House of People Representative. He has been active in Ethiopian politics since 1970, starting with the Ethiopian student movement. And he also served as a minister in the transitional government in the early 90s. He holds a PhD in political economy, also as a research fellow at the Princeton School, I think, of Public Affairs and International Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, and now I'll be introducing you our young leader here in between us, Mrs. Bitania Lulu. Mrs. Bitania Lulu is a very young and very passion-driven young African leader. She has been for the past 8 years, has been playing key interventional role to foster the inclusion of youth in policy making, advocacy, and in many other areas. Currently, she is the youth advisory advocacy advisory at AMREF Health Africa for USAID's integrated youth activity Kafita project that's been implemented in 18 cities in Ethiopia. Thank you for coming, Bitania.
And next to Ms. Jerusalem sits President Mezembet Shenkute. President Mezembet, she is the first female president, I think, in the history of the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce, which has a history of more than 75 years. You were, I think you started your career at the Ethiopian Development Bank, and then later you served for Abba Bank. You also were the CEO for 7 years, and you have a very long experience. And we should also underline that the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce is the strongest chamber of commerce in Ethiopia with more than 10,000 business members. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, and then I will be introducing Dr. Stefan Friedrich, has been head of departments for Sub-Saharan Africa in Berlin since August 2018. From August 2016 up to July 2018, he was head of the New York office of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Foundation. Mr. Friedrich was the founder and first director of the CAS office in Shanghai from 2001 up to 2005, having expertise in United Union Office, multilateral development policy, foreign and security policy in Asia, China, specifically. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you so much again to all of you. And now we start our panel, and we start with His Excellency Ambassador Eshete. Thank you so much for joining us again. You talked in your keynote about the war in the north, and this were like extremely challenging and also difficult years for Ethiopia, 2 years behind us. And it is no doubt that this will take time to heal, and for Ethiopia also time to recover internally, but there's also no doubt that it will not be possible for Ethiopia to be absent from the scene of international affairs. And since we talk about the policy trends in the new year, and also a big question that concerns of many of us is also the global systemic challenge and competition, I would like to ask in the first question, Your Excellency, what is the position that Ethiopia should take in international affairs? Is it with the West? Is it with the East? Is it a unique position? What is the role of Ethiopia as a leading African nation here in Africa, but also on the global stage?
Thank you so much. First of all, I think it is important to underline that Ethiopia didn't give up its responsibility and its fair share in the global diplomatic and public relation affairs. It has been a very difficult time. According to my understanding, the Ethiopian nation has been severely tested during the Italian invasion, where we almost near to lose our independence thanks to our patriots. That didn't happen. The invading force was in the country for 5 years without having our head of state, but the patriots naming their own head of state and so on. This terrible war of the last 2 years also pushed us to that tip. And the reversal of that challenge should not be taken very lightly. We have paid a very, very high price in terms of lives and also the economic loss, the breakage on our social bonds, so on. So on is a very, very deep wound that this healing would take us sometimes. With all these challenges, it is important to note that how Ethiopia managed to stand all this shock. How many countries within the continent would have really overcome this kind of challenges within the stated time span, and then actors and parties to that conflict then realized that this is not the way, and peacemaking is important within the context of the African solution to African problems. These are particular experiences for Ethiopia. I think all this has happened because of the institutional, cultural, and inter-ethnic collaborations in the country that didn't let us fall to the end. The responsibility to act both in the continent and outside the continent for Ethiopia would not be a thing that we can escape from it. This country is the second populous country in the continent. The economic trajectories and the potentials for transformation are there. If we manage to keep on the reform process that we endeavored to and make progress on that, we will have definitely an impactful contribution in the diplomatic and international relation role within the continent, and taking the African voice as a collective body to the international platforms, where, as you know, it is in the multilateral platforms where many of the international arrangements will be defined. So it is my hope, and it is a belief of many Ethiopians, that we are coming, we are there, we stood resolute, and the next years will be time to prove that Ethiopia can play its rightful role in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you talked in your keynote about quite a few challenges also on the international level. You talked about technology, sustainable growth, climate change, many other challenges. And I think we all agree that one of the key solutions to global future policy making is multilateralism. And I would like to know from you, the AU also played a key role in the resolution in finding the peace agreement in the war of the North. You said in your keynote that you think of AU as a platform for sharing Pan-African values. I don't know if the EU would like to know or be known as a platform only. I'm provoking it a little bit. But what I want to know from you, or what we want to know from you, how happy are you with the role of the AU as the first voice for the continent, the first multilateral body of the continent? How happy are you with the role of the AU in international policy making so far?
Yeah, thank you so much. If you take African countries individually, how many of us would have make our voices heard at the global level without the presence of the African Union and its predecessor, the OAU, which has fulfilled its first priority objective of liberating the continent from the scourges of colonialism. We didn't yet fulfill the other aspirations of the African people: development, democracy, good governance, and the list can go on, as everybody is aspiring to reach that. Agenda 2063 has highlighted very clearly where the continent wishes to reach. So African Union as a collective body is a very important diplomatic arm for each member state in the continent whenever we have an agenda to take to the international arena at a bilateral, at individual level, and also when we need to negotiate at the global level as a collective body. For instance, during the negotiation of Agenda 2063, Africa has drafted its common position. Though some of the elements were diluted when they reach the level of broader negotiation, the body has served. We have the African Union Peace and Security Platform with all its architectures, including the regional standby forces and so on. You might challenge me that where are some of them when we see all these conflicts and so on. It is an institution in the making, but it has served the purpose for which it stood, and it is created with many plus and minuses. And Ethiopia as a country, and myself as a diplomat who served, including in our permanent mission to the African Union, I'm happy with what the African Union is doing, but I can't tell you that it is a fulfilled task done at all level and so on. But the platform is very important. This collective body cannot be undermined. No country, no collective body, regional body in the globe would ignore Africa today. That would show you how important the African Union is. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was a strong word for the African Union. I would like to know, what do you think will the future look like? So how will the AU will evolve? Will it maybe eventually receive a mandate, a stronger mandate to negotiate on behalf of AU member states? There's more support for the AU joining, for example, G20 forum. Is this realistic that the AU receives a stronger mandate? Or do you think it might rather be something that we saw last year, right? Hiwote, she mentioned the guided trade initiative under the FTA, where we had 8 countries who took the initiative and started trading. What will the future look like for the AU?
Yeah, as I indicated, AU is a young institution relatively compared to the United Nations, the European Union, and EU, but we are making progress. The African Continental Free Trade Area would be a success. I don't say, and I can't ought to, that it is without challenge. There are many problems in terms of, for instance, the tariff offers, the level of development, the discrepancies that you have, the infrastructure connectivity challenges and so on, which I already mentioned in my keynote remarks, how infrastructure is important. How many days do you take to transport goods from Mombasa to Kinshasa and so on, can have a lesson to learn from. But the union has its challenges, and it has to face those challenges. I don't think there is a difference on that, but the issue of setting sovereignty is not an easy endeavor. We know that, we are aware. The institutions of the union are working on that. And it is the responsibility of our youth, I think, to look into that common future and invest all efforts on that. In terms of mandate, the constitutional act of the African Union has provided for all its cascaded bodies, starting from the assembly down to the permanent representatives committee. And there are other instruments which define what the Bureau of the Union should do, how the assembly would decide and provide directives, and the role of the African Union Commission. I think much of your question goes to the African Union Commission. Commission to represent member states is a limited authority. It must be a very defined authority to exercise. The Bureau of the Union has more leverage on decision taking and so on. But the Assembly can empower the Commission to do more and more things. It is an evolving thing. Through time, and when the agenda, the global agenda requires to do so, mandates will be issued, and the Commission will act accordingly. Regarding the guided initiative on trade, I think it is a very innovative initiative to somehow break some of the bureaucratic hurdles in different member states, and to find a pathway to navigate where the continental free trade area ideas would be implemented. I think we will have more tools in the future. The Secretariat will definitely provide the guidance according to the agreement entered. That is why it is called guided. But the initiative can be taken between different member states without weighting the whole free trade area. And it is good. It is good. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellence, Ambassador Mondoha. Now we're coming to you. It's not a coincidence that the Comoros sits on this panel, and we are also very grateful that you joined us, because we are sure that you might be very busy, because it is only a few weeks until the Comoros will take over and assume the rotating annual presidency of the African Union. You heard a bit what Ambassador Excellence Eshete said about multilateralism, African Union, and we would like to know what will be some of the priorities of the Union of the Comoros when you take over the presidency, maybe also in relation to strengthen the role of AU in global policy forum.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur, et Excellence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur Eshete et chers frères. Merci de vos remarques, merci de votre mot d'ouverture de cette table ronde. Je voulais également remercier les organisateurs de cette table ronde et surtout me féliciter d'avoir participé à cette table ronde de haut niveau. Comme vous l'avez dit, l'Union des Comores se projette à prendre la direction de la présidence de l'Union africaine 2023 en février prochain. C'est une grande opportunité et une estime pour l'Afrique et pour l'Union africaine envers mon pays, mais c'est une lourde responsabilité. C'est une lourde responsabilité puisque vous conviendrez avec nous que l'Afrique, au lendemain de la crise sanitaire du Covid-19 et puis de la crise du conflit ukraino-russe, toutes ces grandes difficultés font que la présidence prochaine de l'Union des Comores ne sera pas une présidence facile. L'Afrique, comme l'a dit l'ambassadeur Eshete, sincèrement, je demande l'assistance de l'applaudir. De l'applaudir parce qu'il a fait un tableau global sur les enjeux du moment et le leadership africain qui doit assumer dans ce moment. L'Union des Comores ne va pas inventer la roue. Il va suivre la ligne tracée par l'Union africaine à travers l'agenda 2063. Cette ligne qui consiste à essayer de suivre les chantiers qui sont déjà engagés au sein de l'Union africaine, puisque en tête, il y aura le thème de l'année. Le thème retenu pour cette année 2023, c'est l'accélération de la zone de libre-échange continentale, la ZLECAf. Donc, ça sera cette priorité. La deuxième priorité s'articulera également sur les questions sécuritaires, puisque vous conviendrez avec nous que lorsqu'on veut développer, lorsqu'il n'y a pas la sécurité, il n'y a pas la paix, donc il n'y aura pas de développement. Donc, pour réussir à ce grand projet phare qui est la ZLECAf au sein de l'Union africaine, il faut avoir la sécurité. Dans ce chantier, c'est très important parce qu'il faut qu'il y ait la circulation des biens et des personnes pour que l'Africain, l'Éthiopien qui quitte Addis Ababa arrive à aller facilement en Ouganda, arrive à aller facilement au Nigeria, arrive facilement. Donc, cela demande avant tout la paix. Puisque lorsqu'il n'y a pas la sécurité, tu ne peux pas bouger. Donc, c'est pour cela que la présidence comorienne va privilégier en premier lieu la sécurité. Mais il y aura également les défis environnementaux, puisque l'Afrique, aujourd'hui, est estimée que c'est le continent de l'avenir. Mais nous pensons que avec ce problème de changement climatique, les inondations, les cyclones, les catastrophes en général, qui mènent à des déplacements forcés, la détérioration, la sécheresse, tout ça, lorsque l'Afrique ne participe pas à cette marche pour trouver des solutions sur les questions environnementales, je crois que nous serons à la traîne. Donc, c'est pour cela que également, parmi les défis de la présidence comorienne, sera les défis climatiques. Troisième défi également, ça sera les défis politiques. Je voulais également remercier l'ambassadeur Eshete, à travers vous, le gouvernement éthiopien, par le leadership de son Excellence le Premier ministre Abiy Ahmed, qui a pu trouver des solutions lorsque le pays se trouvait en difficulté. Avec les difficultés qu'ils avaient avec les frères éthiopiens du Nord, mais avec la ténacité et le dévouement et l'engagement du leadership du Premier ministre Abiy Ahmed, il a pu amener, bien sûr, avec le concours de l'Union africaine qui s'est engagée également, ensemble, on a pu trouver, en commençant à trouver des débuts de solutions pour les difficultés que le pays où nous habitons aujourd'hui, le pays où il y a le siège de l'Union africaine, commence déjà à trouver des solutions. Et encore une fois, nous remercions ce leadership des autorités éthiopiennes. Donc, il y a ce défi politique. Ce défi politique également s'étend sur les problèmes des élections. J'ai pu énumérer, je crois, déjà à peu près plus de 7 élections. On aura des élections. Par exemple, au Nigeria, au Gabon, la Sierra Leone, le Libéria, Madagascar, Congo, Brazzaville. Les élections, malheureusement, arrivent parfois, ça dégénère à des conflits. Donc, ce défi politique, nous devons être à l'avant-garde pour que nous essayions. Et d'ailleurs, cette année, puisque tous les 2 ans, l'Union africaine présente ce qu'on appelle la gouvernance en Afrique, l'état de la gouvernance en Afrique, tous les 2 ans. Donc, cette année également, on aura, lors du sommet, à adopter le rapport sur la gouvernance en Afrique. Donc, je voulais insister que nous devons essayer, à travers ces élections, pour qu'il y ait vraiment de véritables élections démocratiques, pour que les dirigeants qui seront choisis seront des dirigeants qui seront acceptés par le peuple d'Afrique. Comme je l'ai dit, l'Union des Comores ne va pas inventer la roue. Il va suivre uniquement la politique conformément aux défis de l'agenda 2063. Puisque c'est la feuille de route dont l'Afrique s'est dotée, s'est dotée pour les 50 ans à venir. Et l'Union africaine, cette année en 2023, va terminer le premier cycle, ce qu'on appelle le plan décennal de l'Union africaine. Donc, la présidence comorienne aura également à évaluer ce premier plan décennal qui a défini certains projets phares, notamment qui est la ZLECA. Voilà en gros, je voulais situer un peu ce que la présidence africaine comorienne compte mener en continuation de ce qu'il a dit. Mais il y a quelque chose de très important que je voulais ajouter pour ne pas oublier. Il y a ce dynamique qui est déjà engagé pour que la voix de l'Afrique au sein de la scène internationale soit toujours entendue. Je voulais vous donner un exemple. L'ambassadeur Eshete, qui est parmi les éminents ambassadeurs que j'ai connus ici à Addis Ababa, a parlé que l'Afrique pour un pays, ce n'est pas fort. Mais une fois que l'Afrique est unie, les 54 États, c'est très fort et c'est très puissant. C'est justement dans cet élan que nous allons continuer pour que la voix de l'Afrique soit connue. C'est ainsi qu'il y a cette approche que l'Afrique se dit, l'Afrique doit être présente au G20. L'Afrique doit être présente au G20 parce que la voix de l'Afrique doit peser sur la marche du monde. Nous pensons et nous estimons que lorsque l'Afrique sera absente dans les décisions de la marche du monde, c'est comme un être qui a perdu un pied, donc il va marcher très mal. Voilà ce que je voulais ajouter par rapport à la présidence comorienne. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Actuellement et très malheureusement, l'Afrique est gênée à l'interne. Nous avons vu un développement au cours des 2 dernières années avec les changements anticonstitutionnels des gouvernements. L'histoire des Comores, on sait, aussi a été marquée par plusieurs coups d'État et nous aimerions savoir comment expliquez-vous ce nouveau développement très malheureux et est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose que les autres pays africains peuvent apprendre de cette histoire douloureuse?
Merci beaucoup. Effectivement, ces derniers temps, la région de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, qui a été considérée comme étant le grenier de la démocratie en Afrique, a connu une recrudescence des changements anticonstitutionnels, notamment au Mali, au Burkina, en Guinée, mais également un peu ici, on a connu un peu ici en Afrique de l'Est, au Soudan. Donc, ces difficultés, l'Afrique s'est attelée pour trouver des solutions. C'est ainsi que l'année dernière, en 2022, nous avons organisé le sommet extraordinaire à Malabo pour voir pourquoi ces recrudescences des coups d'État. Pourquoi c'est venu? Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? J'aurais à expliquer à la fin, mais le pays comme le Comore, comme vous l'avez dit, mon pays a connu aux années 80 jusqu'aux années 90 une série de coups d'État. à une série de coups d'État qui a freiné le développement de mon pays. Ça, c'était une évidence. Mais chez nous, ce qui s'est passé, c'est malheureusement les conséquences d'une décolonisation inachevée. Je dis cela parce que le coup d'État a été perpétré par des gens venant de l'extérieur et qui n'est autre, ce n'est secret à personne. C'est un fameux mercenaire qui était connu mondialement, qui s'appelait Bob Denard, qui était dans les réseaux du colonialisme. Donc, c'est pour cela que mon pays a estimé que tous les problèmes que nous avons connus de ces coups d'État-là, c'était des coups d'État dus à la décolonisation inachevée. Parce que les Comores, sur le plan du droit et sur le plan international, est connu comme étant un archipel de 4 îles. Une de ces 4 îles, c'est-à-dire au niveau des Nations Unies, les Comores, toutes les organisations internationales, lorsque nous avons accédé à l'indépendance en 1975, est reconnu comme étant un archipel de 4 îles. Mayotte, Anjouan, Moélie et la Grande Comore. Mais malheureusement, la puissance colonisatrice de l'époque s'est accaparée de l'île et nous continuons toujours à les revendiquer. Toutes les déstabilisations, je vous dis tout, les déstabilisations que nous avons connues avaient pris toujours origine, c'est parti par l'île qui est sous la domination coloniale jusqu'alors, l'île de Mayotte. Donc c'est pour cela que je vous disais que les conséquences d'une décolonisation inachevée, ce qui a causé les coups d'État à répétition. Mais les Comoriens ont pu trouver une solution puisque après les coups d'État, nous avons connu également une grande crise qui est la crise séparatiste. C'est-à-dire une autre île voulait se détacher de l'Union des Comores. Donc, mais sous le leadership du président actuel à l'époque, on a pu trouver une discussion, un dialogue national, une réconciliation nationale qui a fait que maintenant, au niveau des Comores, il y a ce qu'on appelle la présidence tournante, ce qui a prévalu qu'on a posé de nouvelles bases et on a pu trouver des solutions idoines entre nous, sous l'égide bien sûr de l'Union africaine. Maintenant, on est à peu près plus de 25 ans. On n'a pas connu ce genre de coups d'État et le pays est dans la stabilité. Voilà ce que je voulais ajouter. Mais pour ce qui est des autres pays, comme vous l'avez dit, comme je l'ai dit tantôt d'entrée, l'Union africaine est en train de monter des mécanismes de prévention sur ces situations. Et je crois que lors du sommet de janvier, on aura rapport aux mécanismes que nous estimons établir et des décisions idoines vont être renforcées, puisque vous connaissez, lorsqu'un pays a fait un changement anticonstitutionnel, il est suspendu dans les instances de l'Union africaine, mais il y a encore de nouveaux mécanismes que nous voulons travailler à travers ce qu'on appelle les mécanismes africains d'évaluation par les pairs, parce qu'il faut prévenir. Il faut prévenir, il faut renforcer ce mécanisme qui essaie d'évaluer chaque pays, que lorsqu'il y a des signaux, par exemple le manque de la bonne gouvernance, le manque de la démocratie, le non-respect de territoire de droit, parce que nous estimons que c'est parmi des facteurs qui aident à ces changements anticonstitutionnels. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Dernière question de notre part. L'année dernière a été aussi marquée par l'agression russe et la guerre en Ukraine. Et je pense, pour ce qui est l'Afrique, c'est important de voir d'une manière nuancée, voir les raisons pour lesquelles quelques pays se sont abstenus des votes au sein de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies et aussi voir les raisons pour lesquelles d'autres pays ont soutenu l'Ukraine. Les Comores, ils ont soutenu l'Ukraine 2 fois au vote de mars et aussi au vote d'avril pour ce qui était la suspension de la Russie des conseils des droits de l'homme. Et nous aimerions savoir qu'est-ce qui ont été les raisons pour les Comores pour soutenir l'Ukraine Et est-ce que c'était aussi lié à la question, parce que voilà, les Comores, c'est un petit pays, est-ce que c'était lié au fait que les Comores sont préoccupés avec ses souverainetés et aussi le concept de l'intégralité?
Merci.
Territorial.
Effectivement, à 2 reprises, les Comores ont soutenu la résolution tentant à condamner l'agression ukrainienne. Nous considérons que c'est du droit. Il y a le droit. La force ne doit pas être supérieure au droit. Et surtout, nous, comme je le disais, imaginez si Madagascar se lève le lendemain, il dit qu'il ne veut pas rendre une partie des Comores. Bon, il ne le fera pas parce qu'on est vraiment des frères et amis, mais tout est possible. Donc, c'est dans ce principe que nous restons. Nous restons. Et puis, les Comores, c'est un pays très pacifique. Très pacifique, puisque, comme je vous ai dit, le premier ami des Comores, c'est la France. Et pourtant, il nous a pris une partie du pays. Donc, vous voyez un peu le paradoxe. Mais nous estimons que cela interpelle à tout le monde. C'est pour cela que l'Afrique, l'Union africaine, milite à ce qu'il y ait ce réforme au niveau du Conseil de sécurité. Puisqu'aujourd'hui, au nom du veto, un pays peut dire « je fais tout ce que je veux ». Non, on ne peut pas continuer comme ça. Donc, c'est pour cela que nous, c'est dans un principe de l'équilibre mondial qu'on se disait que non, nous ne pouvons pas être en marge de la solution négociée. Nous pensons également que ce n'est pas par les armes qu'on réglera le problème, c'est par le dialogue. Peut-être que la Russie a des revendications légitimes, mais nous ne croyons pas que c'est par la force, par les bombes, par les atrocités des populations que vraiment qu'on pourra régler le problème. C'est à travers le dialogue. Nous avons fait l'expérience chez nous et nous pensons que c'est toujours, de toute façon, même si on envoie toujours les bombes, à la fin, on sera obligé de parler. Retourner sur une table pour discuter. Donc, il faut qu'on parle d'abord au lieu d'utiliser les armes. Donc, nous pensons que nous devons contraindre par tous les moyens. Et surtout, chez nous, on dit avec la guerre de la salive. C'est la guerre de la salive que nous menons pour que ces deux frères, Ukraine et Russie, trouvent une solution négociée sur le dialogue, mais pas pour les bombes. Mais nous condamnons toute agression qui venant de toutes parts, puisque l'agression n'amène pas la paix, mais au contraire, ça mène la guerre. Voilà.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Benno. It's quite interesting session we are having here. I will be coming to Honorable Dr. Dima. You have been practicing politician and policymaker for many years, and you are a very dedicated observer of domestic and international politics. In our introduction, we have said that did the world, we have raised the question that did the world get off track over the last few years in view of the current situation we are having when we refer to the previous years of peace and stability. We are currently having complex international situations. So in your opinion, is there an underlying root cause for the current situation we are facing? How did the world get off the track? How did we come to this?
Well, thank you very much. I would like some qualification. I've not been a practicing politician for a long time. I've been a member of parliament just for a year and a half or so. Before that, I was engaged in all sorts of things, but of course, I have been studying and observing politics around the world. we are in a crisis as a world, as a global community right now. And I think the underlying causes of this crisis lies in the crisis of the liberal order itself. The liberal order both domestically and also at the global level. The current order we have was more or less constructed following the end of the Second World War, both domestically and globally. At the domestic level, the reconstruction of Europe and the war-ravaged economies was based on a certain equilibrium, the equilibrium between the state, labor, and capital. This arrangement did produce a dynamic economic growth. This arrangement was also built around the welfare state. And over the last 30 years or so, we have been witnessing the erosion of this equilibrium, especially in favor of capital. So I think this has created a domestic crisis where the political order itself has become not really, listening to the population. It is not responsive to the people they rule, they govern. As a result, we see the traditional political parties in most of Europe declining in their influence. For the first time in Germany now, we have a three-party coalition government for the first time since the war, which is very difficult to manage. In Italy, we have more or less a neo-fascist regime, and the right is surging in France and in many other major European countries, in Poland, in Hungary. This is a trend. And the same in the United States. We have seen efforts to change the outcome of elections through force, and more recently, even in Brazil. So I think that this is a crisis of the liberal democratic order, which failed to adjust to the changing realities domestically. And the same is true also at the international level. The post-war international order was built around the victorious powers of the Second World War. But since the 1940s, the world has changed considerably. The number of sovereign states has more or less grown fourfold. The economies have changed. The dynamism of the global economy has shifted from Europe to Asia. Asia now has a significant chunk of the global economy, but the international system failed to adjust to the growing realities in the world. That, I think, is the root cause of the crisis we are in right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So what do you think? It's undoubtable that there have been important social changes that you mentioned right now and evolutions over the past 2 decades. For example, through modern technology, Not only that, it's easier for people nowadays to participate and express their opinions with the help of social media. It's very accessible and it's very easy to express oneself publicly and necessarily strengthens individualism. Ethiopia being a rather conservative country where religion and social norms take a big role and an important role. How do you see the evolution and growth of individualism? Is it an opportunity or rather a problem regarding Ethiopia and the world?
Well, I don't accept the conclusion that Ethiopia is a conservative society. It is not. I mean, we have conservatives just like any other country. In fact, Ethiopia has changed a lot over the years. Ethiopia has actually entertained one of the most consequential revolutions of the 20th century, revolutions being rare events in human history. And that's why I don't accept that term. Nevertheless, of course, Ethiopia has very strong traditions and we value our traditions, we value our culture, we value our history. Ethiopia cannot live isolated from the rest of the world. Whatever happens in the rest of the world affects our country, our society. Our society has actually changed quite a lot. I mean, from the period I was a young student to now. I will tell you, when I was a university student, I had only one woman classmate. Imagine. In high school, I had none. But it's different now, which means we have changed. And of course, with developments of technology, social media, I believe technology can be a challenge, but it can also provide an opportunity. If we use it wisely to benefit large sectors of society, I think we can really, in fact, we can even catch up using modern technology. We can catch up with the rest of the world faster than it took some other countries. I think it provides an opportunity. At the same time, it can be a challenge, especially if it is not used properly, if it is not utilized for the benefit of society. Every, especially with the use of social media, what I see is every society has its own fringe groups. Social media has actually highlighted the views of such groups more than the average population of the country. As a result, so destructive elements, fringe benefits who do not get traction in the major media or among the general public, use these platforms to spread their views. So this can actually be a challenge. It's not only a challenge, it's not only to Ethiopia, but to many other countries. But we should be able to manage it, I think.
So do you think stronger individualism is a trait and triggers the kind of populism we have been witnessing this past years around the world?
Well, I don't think individualism is what is triggering the rise of populism. The rise of populism has many other causes. I mean, individualism actually believes in the individual. It doesn't, I mean, whereas populism takes some political causes and tries to mobilize and galvanize people around that, especially the idea of nationalism. I mean, when we look at some of the political movements in Europe, it's basically the nationalism that is driving these elements. Europe actually delegitimized nationalism after the war. They did delegitimize, and now it is coming back actually. Trying to fight back the erosion of the sovereignty of states, especially in Europe. This has to do with the European integration is one of those political points the right wing, the populist elements are making. So in a sense, the populists are arguing for the collective, not for the individual. So in a sense, individualism is not such a threat, but of course, individuals should exercise their free will. I mean, but within society, they can't behave as they like, because people have to work within a certain system, a certain community, within a society, within a state, within a country. So they have to respect other rules also, while they are all exercising their individual freedoms and liberties.
Since we have also talked about youth and politics, the young generation and politics, the young generation was born into and grew up with this new reality of social media, as we raised previously, of getting quick recognitions, being seen, being liked, being commented, being followed, and connecting with many other use quick results which are entertaining, that make them entertaining. That's quick results bring quick satisfaction. Politics is no contrary to that, but it's contrary to that, and politics is about compromise. It takes time. It needs communication, debating, listening to each other, find common solutions in society, and mobilize majorities. Do you think this is a problem, even a risk for younger generation when they enter politics, because this desire of receiving quick results may harm politics in your country, which is in Ethiopia, in the future?
Well, as I said, social media is a challenge. And the current, we have always been youth. I mean, every generation had its youth. I mean, so youth, being young is a transient phase. It is not a stationary phase anyway. Well, the current generation of young people came out of age during this era of technological innovation and development and spread of social media networks. What I see in social media is they have been really a challenge to traditional forms of political organization. Just individuals networking on the social medium, people think is enough to conduct politics. But politics, as you said, is the art of the compromise. You have to mobilize people, articulate views, and build consensus around certain political views, certain political opinion, and then try to win the voice of the majority to implement those articulated political views. The current youth, in a way, lacks a certain level of depth, because social media doesn't produce a depth of knowledge, depth of analysis. It's just a few sentences. Nowadays, even politicians use the social media to express their views, actually even to announce appointments and many other things. So as a result, it is really these platforms, instead of the traditional forms of voting at the grassroots level, to mobilize people for certain political objectives. So as a result, I think the current youth generation needs to have some depth of knowledge of its history, the history of their countries, their society. They need to know the society itself. So instead of spending most of their time on these platforms, they also need to read, study, and try to, I think, grasp the actual essence of the challenges society is facing.
Thank you, Honorable Dr. Dima Negewo. So should I continue? Thank you. Okay, we are going to pass on our young leader, Bitania Lulu, Mrs. Bitania Lulu. Mrs. Bitania Lulu, there are various approaches of leadership in today's society, which is not a mystery. Some young leaders can have trouble deciding which strategy works best for them. What do you believe regarding this thought, and think about the issue from the standpoint of a young person who's going to become a community leader, or who wants to become a leader? Do you believe there is a certain manner a young leader should practice for leadership position in the future? Maybe you can add your own experience.
Thank you very much. I would like to start my intervention by responding to what Dr. Dima has just said. He said the current generation of young people lacks depth, and I disagree with that 100%. And I see a lot of young audience here. Do you lack depth? Do you? I think that's a very hasty generalization. I took offense to that because I stand for the rights of the young people, and I give voice to the various energetic and dynamic young leaders across Africa and the world. So I really disagree with that point. Approaches of leadership for the young people. Maybe I'll share my personal experience of how I got here. I started my leadership journey when I was a student in Addis Ababa University. Growing up, I actually wanted to become an astrophysicist. I was really tech savvy. I was really good at math and physics. So I joined electrical and computer engineering. But after joining the University of Addis, I saw there was a lack of platform for young people to transition into the full capacities that they can get, because it's only academics. And for the current generation, I don't think academic excellence is the only important thing, but they have to equip themselves with the leadership skills, the various capacities that they need to equip themselves with. So I saw that lack of that platform in my university at the time. So I started with the mindset of being a solution maker. The solution starts with me. I saw a problem, I identified it, and I proceeded to action. So I collected a number of young people to create a platform, which was called YALDA at the time, Youth Alliance for Leadership and Development in Africa. It was a student-led movement that is present in 38 other African countries. And I brought that idea to Ethiopia because I believe that that platform was very necessary for young people to really to transition into a wholesome leaders that their country and continent needs them to be. So that's the first tip, being a solution maker. Second is being a game changer. We're not going to follow the trends that have existed for the last decade or two. We have to create new realities of leadership that works for our generation as 21st century leaders. Of course, we learn from history. We take what's best for us and craft a new future that works for the next generation of us. Even after us, there's Generation Z that's younger than us. So being that game changer requires resilience as well. That's the third point. When they close the door for you, you have to try and sneak in with the window. When they don't invite you to the decision-making tables, you bring your own folding chairs. You demand your space to be there, because in Africa, meaningful youth engagement is not yet practiced. It's still a new concept. Of course, we're being recognized right now. The African Union chairperson has a youth envoy after a lot of advocacy done by the likes of myself. I was also the first appointed special advisor on youth to European Commissioner Urpilainen, which was a very good move that the EU took in engaging young people. That shows that young people have to be the leaders with us, with the elder generation. So intergenerational co-leadership is very important. So young people will not tolerate being sidelined, right? So we will use social media, technology, and mobilizing ourselves to create the new trails that we need and that works for the next generation, that is us. So the approaches of leadership for youth, solution makers, game changers, and resilience. And of course, at the end, we have to also practice servant leadership. It's not power that we seek, especially from the like-minded young people that I've worked with across the continent and around the world. We are trying to change, to bring sustainable change and positive solutions to our problems. That is being servant to our community. So all these things lead up to being servant leadership. And I think that's different than the elder generation that was really focused on the power grab from my point of view. So no, we don't lack depth. We're very deep rooted in creating the solutions that Africa needs us to create. So that's my answer, briefly.
Thank you, Bitania. Round of applause for Bitania. Yeah, what's the big thing is being a servant leadership. It's easier being said than done. But I think most young people are currently more engaging in the leadership part, which is servant leadership currently. So how do you envision the youth influencing decision-making, effective community participation, policy making, given the accessibility of social media? Is it inevitable that more and more young people would feel the urge to express themselves on social media as they grow up in a time where social media is widely accessible, which is in the urban cities or in rural cities? So how do you envision that?
Well, I'll start with an example of my country, Ethiopia. Currently, I'm the youth advocacy advisor for a giant project that is being implemented across Ethiopia in 18 cities. So with the assessment that we made, we found that 99.7% of young people have access to smartphones. That means they have a voice. They can use social media. They can self-mobilize themselves. So that's a great platform for them to be a change makers, or, you know, if we don't invest with them, they can also be a threat to the continent and the country. But that doesn't mean that only city youth are representative of the whole reality. Dr. Dima has already mentioned earlier that, you know, majority of Africa is in the rural setting, but they still have access to different communication materials. So I really do appreciate the fact that accessibility is prominent in the 21st century, and it gives a platform to the young people to influence decision-making and policy-making globally and continentally. We can take examples of the climate crisis. Young people are the ones that self-mobilized themselves and created global movements for decision makers to actually give it a priority. I heard earlier where Honorable Ambassador was saying that the AU this year is going to focus also on environment and climate change, and it didn't come lightly. It's mostly the young people that really self-mobilized and created the attention that it deserves. The other example that I could give you, the Black Lives Matter. movement. I'm sure everyone in this room knows about it. During the pandemic, there was a lot of racism crimes in the US, and that Black Lives Matter movement, it wasn't just a US problem anymore. It was a global matter. So it was also the young people that created that using social media, fighting for justice. Another example would be also the Arab Spring. I know it wasn't very recent, but it was still in the 21st century, where young people self-mobilized themselves and really used social media to influence what came out of the Arab Spring within our continent. So yes, young people can influence decision-making with the use of social media, because the media cannot ignore, voices globally that are self-mobilized, millions of likes, millions of tractions. So it's just at the tip of our phones that we can really support these great causes using our phones. Of course, it comes with threats. There is disinformation, misinformation, especially after the pandemic. There was a lot of chaos that was created because of social media, but also we have to really underscore that young people have really played their part in creating the leadership that's needed using social media to influence policy making in the 21st century.
Thank you. You already mentioned that young people frequently create their own thoughts and beliefs and on many social and political topics, since they are constantly communicating and engaging with each other. What are the main issues that young people in our society currently are facing, and how do you believe that elders or seniors' perceptions of their role could be improved to foster better social engagement for all parties concerned? This is in reference to your current position as a youth advocacy advisor.
In the African context, the first thing that we talk about is economic challenges for young people. We are at the biggest youth bulge that the continent, even the globe, has ever seen. We have over 70% of the population under the age of 35. In Ethiopia alone, over 35% of the population is between the ages of 18 to 29, which really alarms that we have a lot of young people that the world has ever seen. So we don't have the job market or economic opportunities to really tap into those potential that we have. So when young people are left vacant, then the peace and security problems and all of those things arise. So that's the biggest challenge that young people face, I think. But in terms of meaningful engagement, there is a huge gap to understanding what meaningful youth engagement is. Young people are not invited to decision-making tables, and I'm the only young person in this panel. As you can see, most of the people that make the decision for us are older men, not even women. So we still have a huge generational gap in terms of creating a common future together. So that's the major problem that I see as a youth advocacy advisor for my role, or the youth leader that I have been for the past decade. So meaningful engagement goes beyond giving young people a voice. Just having me speak here does not solve the solution. We have to institutionalize the engagement of young people in the policy and decision-making platforms in each country. In Africa, right now, there are only 3 countries that have a presidential advisor for youth affairs, namely Uganda, Ghana, and Namibia. Of course, the African Union has a youth envoy. I was the special envoy for youth for EU, but we still have a long ways to go. We have 54 member states. So that's an assignment that I would give to our honorable ambassador here, as the Comoros is the presidency for AU, to really push for member states to have their youth advisors in the different countries. So we need to be meaningfully engaged, and this engagement gets institutionalized and not just a legacy of, specific leaders. That's one. Second, youth-friendly essential services. When we talk about essential services, it's health services, education services. Are they really responding to the needs of the current young people? So we really need to assess and have an evidence-based revisions to our educational policies and health policies to produce the next generation of young leaders. Let me go back to the meaningful engagement of youth part. We have a national dialogue going on in Ethiopia. A lot of non-governmental actors have been putting an effort into that in the past couple of years, which I was also a part of when I was a researcher at the Center for Dialogue Research at CDRC and Corporation. It's mostly older women, older men still. And I've worked with Dr. Tima, so he knows that. And even when I was there, we tried to create a new track for women, but still, of course, we tried to create the gender parity, but the youth component is heavily ignored. So one assignment that I would give to Dr. Dima in his current role is to ensure that young people of Ethiopia are engaged in this national dialogue process, because if it's not owned by the young people, it's not going to go anywhere, is it? No. One last thing about the key issues that are faced by young people. Of course, I talked about the economic opportunities, but when we create economic opportunities, it has to be also decent jobs for young people. We have a lot of industrial parks in Ethiopia. How much are they getting paid? 1,500 birr. That's $20 or $30. Is that really, isn't that modern slavery in my view? How do you expect a young person in Ethiopia to work over 10 hours a day and make only 1,500 birr a month? That is a national crisis in my view. And that's not just me. We held a national advocacy agenda setting workshop, gathering young people from 18 cities in Ethiopia. So it's a collective voice that I am representing, saying that we have to really set minimum wages for young people and create decent jobs for them, not just, get them a job and not pay them at all. It's better to just have them as volunteers than, abusing them like that. So that's just one last thought from the key issues. But in terms of changing the perceptions of the elders for better engagement of everyone involved, intergenerational co-leadership is the way to go. I'm not saying the elder generation should just, quit and give us the seat, but we want to lead with the elder generation so that we can learn from history, get their wisdom, and also introduce the new energetic and dynamic ways of thinking that we bring to the table. Young people are experts of their lives. They know a lot. We're tech savvy, we're well-informed, we can self-mobilize. With the wisdom of the elder generation, I think we can set a better future for everyone involved. So yeah, even when I was leading the Africa-Europe Youth Summit earlier last year, February 2022, the young people from both continents demanded that we get a quota system of 30% for young people in decision-making in the different countries. So perhaps whoever has power in their countries here, I'll give you the assignment as well, to ensure that you leave 30% of decision-making power to young people and 50% to women. Even in this panel, which I see only 3 women on. So gender equality and intergenerational co-leadership is the way to go. With that, I will give that.
Thank you, Ms. Bitania. It's one of the concerns of the youth right now you have raised. And then I'm very sure Honorable Ambassador, Honorable Dr. Dima also took his assignment, and every youth in the room has taken the assignment given by Bitania. Last but not least, as a female youth leader, what's the most empowering piece of advice you have ever received? And in addition to that, what's the most empowering thing to do as a female leader? You are currently engaging in a project that is going to be implemented. It has been implemented in 18 cities in Ethiopia. So what's the most inspiring thing to do as a young female leader?
Perhaps it's not an advice, but a life story that I saw as an inspirational model for me. As I said earlier, I wanted to become an astrophysicist. So the person that I looked up to most was called Dr. Mae Jemison. She was the first female to ever go to space. She's an American medical doctor and an astronomer, and she's also an actress. She dances. So she was the living embodiment of being excellent in multiple tracks. So that made me see that I can also excel in multiple fields. Of course, I am an electrical engineer, but I supported that with the passion of youth engagement with African studies doing my master's in Geneva and here. And I'm advising multiple projects, not just in Ethiopia, but globally. So yeah, that was a living embodiment of daring to dream and making sure that you can get there. So for all the young people that are here, male or female, doesn't matter. if they dare dream, they can get there, and you can really be the trailblazers and at the next century or the current century.
Thank you, Ms. Bitania. I will go to Mr. Benno.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jerusalem. And we have to thank our audience for being patient with us. It's a big panel. There's a lot of food for thought, or megableras, as you would say, maybe in Amharinia, I don't know. We have many political animals on the panel, and we are now continuing with our economist, Ms. Mesemet Shenkute, president of the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce. And I'm sure that you are very concerned with the international dynamics that we see: price increase, high inflation. We have slowing global supply chains. We also saw over the past few years the use of tariff barriers as a tool of power between the global powers. I would like to know how much concerned are you with all those, and how much does it affect the economy here in the capital?
Oh, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. You know, I just want to tell you that I wondered how I presume this place as a president of the chamber after 75 years. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've had so many problems because, you know, I was elected for the second time. I was the first president of the chamber. Again, I was elected. But when I was elected for the first 2-3 years, it was so nice, you know, to move like anyone and entertain our members. We have about 15,000 members, and there was no problem of logistics or what, and there was no COVID or what. Then again, I was elected for the second time after serving for 4 years. And, you know, all things were really, challenging. And what I did was, you know, since I cannot control the external environment, what I did was, you know, assessing my own environment internally. And I tried my best, you know, to move as usual the chamber and try to entertain our members. This is the most challenging period whereby there are logistics problems, inflation is there, and so many things. So I showed for women leaders that, you know, women can do it. So for the second time when I'm elected, you know, things were moving very positively. So this thing which I have to tell to everybody, a woman leaders may be here, and Bitania, and this is a very good experience for me. So when it comes to these logistics problems, you know, I may tell you points whereby people are really, this is a talking issues of the world, but still there is, like, for instance, there are 3 important variables, as you very well know: the COVID-19, the China, US, Europe relations, and the Ukraine war. And these things are still there, which could as well be viewed as an offshoot of the Russia, US, Europe relations. Because of this globalization, our business people in Ethiopia are affected because of this. Coupled with this also, there are also, you know, during the past 11 months, the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine, which literally, really literally added fuel to the already burning fire of the world, are still affecting us still now. The sanctions imposed by US in Europe and others. So the supply, important internationally traded goods such as fertilizer, Swiss and what, has affected concerning our Ethiopian business people, that the manufacturing sector is affected, the industry and so on, because of this. Because, you know, due to the logistics problem, they cannot really get the inputs and as much as they used to. So this has been reflected on our business people as well. We cannot even now, you know, the no war, no peace situations between US and China are points which we have to point out. These 2 countries being the 2 largest economies of the world, we can presume from this that severed the international trade, whereby our business people are also in there. On the other hand, we need to understand that, you know, trade policies are not immune. They are not immune from being political instruments. I'll come to that when we talk of the UN or what. These are a good case in point is the AGOA, whereby our country has been banned on Ethiopia's participation in the American Growth and Opportunity Act, which is AGOA. And these are precise manifestations. These are precise manifestations that trade policies have been affected because of politics as well. So overall, the assessments and predictions outlook of the global economy points toward the slowdown of the international trade, which leads to recession in major economies. What would come after Mars, God knows, because we are still in it again. So because of these global problems, which I have mentioned earlier, I mean, the logistics and what has been affected, and, including our country, Ethiopia, we cannot really get whatever result we were expecting.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up. You talked about God knows what's coming tomorrow. We talked about multilateralism and before, and Ethiopia is not part of the WTO now. It's negotiating that, or it wants to join. How confident are you that such multilateral bodies are still capable of solving some of the global problems that you touched upon?
Yeah, as I indicated earlier, there is no clear interconnections between trade on one hand and policies of governments on the other. Moreover, the trend which I highlighted earlier has posed equally serious doubts on the instrumentality of international organizations such as the UN, the Security Council, could not stop the war in Ukraine, neither could it bring peace. So elsewhere in the situation is similar when we analyze the credibility of acceptance in words of the WTO and WHO during the COVID responses. So yes, the global collective leadership is at crisis, and this might be time to start thinking about how to reform or establish a new system. Because of these basic situations, particularly in our country, we have to think twice to be a member of the WTO, because truly speaking, personally, we are not United Nations today, but still we have United Nations. The United Nations even cannot really bring peace or security. And these institutions are not institutions. These are kind of companies ruled by individuals. So Ethiopia has to think of being, entering into the WTO or others, although processes are there. But because of these situations all over the world, I think our position is that, we have to think twice to be a member of these, institutions. We call them institutions, although they are ruled by individuals as well. So I always say that the United Nations, we are not United Nations today. So we say that radical system has to be employed to bring together the nation and to be, to use the purpose of where this institution have been, established.
Thanks. You talked also about the impact on the Ethiopian economy of what we saw over the past few years. My very last question, and if you want, you can also give a brief answer, but I would be curious to know, how do you see the policy and the reactions of the Ethiopian government to curb these repercussions, be it the public debt, be it to reinvigorate foreign and also domestic investment in Ethiopia? How happy are you with that policy?
This is a very difficult question, but first and foremost, Ethiopia is not an island. It cannot be there, by itself. As much as the other world is affected, Ethiopia will also be affected due to these global environments. For good or bad. So whatever happens in the global and regional economies would certainly have an impact on our country as well, be it trade or not, because our chamber believes that our country is not different from the others. This thing which I have to to point out, and now the world regress in the slowdown and recession. So slowdown and recession. Ethiopian economy is also seeing serious anomalies, which are reflections of the structure of the economy or inefficiencies because of the impact of the global situation as well. On the other hand, we appreciate the government, taking care of this, the homegrown economy, And as well, the Ethiopian government has also recognized that the success we had during those last years cannot be really, we cannot go on like that. Because of this, we appreciate that the government has set the homegrown economy and tried to imbalance all the days for what problems we have economically. And they are working a lot on changing the imbalance in a variety of ways. Maybe we don't have, the external and internal financing sources, the high debt distresses, and the domestic banks, facing vulnerabilities, the double-digit inflations, and so on. This has been, taken care by the government, whereby our chamber has also taken care. The government that, there are pillars of economic reforms program, recognizing that we cannot move in as much as we do during those periods. And we appreciate that there is a macroeconomic reforms, structural reforms, sectoral reforms, and, to make price stabilities, financial stabilities in terms of macroeconomic factors, and structural reforms as well, to do businesses easily, and, to address institutional market values to bring investment, jobs, or growth. Anyway, what we have seen, the effort which tries to bring about, change, the effort which tries to bring success again. There are reform coordination committees led by our Prime Minister as well. And these are very good starts as well. So what we feel is that provided the government reform builds on and taking the ideas of experts, of Ethiopian experts as well, and we feel that the Ethiopia can come up again, provided that we take care of all these reforms and implement them with a better people, with skilled people, with expertise, and we can come up with it. So the government, even our chamber, realizes that there is a problem in fulfilling these situations or in fulfilling this and be successful. But the government's attempt to change all this in economic terms would bring us to a better situation. That's what I feel.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Stefan Friedrich. To come back to one of our introductory questions, which I also mentioned to Honorable Dr. Dima. Did the world get off track when we look back where we were in like 2011 or 12, when we witnessed not only in Germany stability and growth, and could rather not imagine that anything such as COVID would happen. How did we get there?
I can repeat now what my predecessor said. It's a tough question. I don't have the answer for this, but you're right that the situation we were in 2011-12, that certainly was a much more positive looking future. And indeed, we couldn't have imagined something like the Russian aggression against Ukraine could happen. The fact that something like COVID could happen, I think we were much better prepared. I mean, there were scenarios in 2013 and so on about global pandemics, but apparently we didn't take them as serious as we should have taken them. But COVID showed us that we have to be much more aware of such scenarios, and I think the world learned on the very hard way that things like this could happen, and it's not over yet. We see what's going on in China. They have a very serious problem now with their long-term zero COVID policies. So this is something we have to be prepared. Something like Russian aggression, I think many people, even in February last year, early February, didn't believe that it could happen. And this is certainly something, well, we could have prepared ourselves for something like that, but particularly in Europe, I think, and in Germany, we were very used to following the sentence, we are surrounded by friends and there can't be any conflict anymore, or military conflict. So we just, well, were in this very wishful thinking that something like this could not happen. But we learned also the very hard way that it is possible. And what we in Germany now since almost 1 year call die Zeitenwende, the change of times. I mean, this is particularly a Zeitenwende within Germany because we didn't want to believe that there could be military aggression. But now we have to adapt to a situation where this is a reality, and we have to face this. And there were a lot of developments on the way. I mean, the election of President Trump in the United States that had been referred to before already, and also within the European Union, where some governments have a very peculiar interpretation of democratic institutions. That is a tendency which is very difficult. And we have to adapt to this. And Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, you refer to the crisis of the liberal democracies. Yes, we have crises, several of them, but I think the democracies also proved that they are in a position to cope with crisis and to make changes from within. And this is well, something that many authoritarian regimes do not have. They don't have the civil society, the youth, and the integration of formats that are correcting problematic developments. And what we see in China, in Russia, Iran, these authoritarian states, they face severe crisis also at the moment. And that is certainly not a coincidence. The world is getting more and more complex, more complicated, more interconnected. And if something happens in Africa, it might have influences also in Europe or vice versa. And so there was also the thing of, or the talk about popularism. I mean, these populists, they have the tendency to try to present the world less complex than it actually is. And they give fake answers, since they give simple answers which cannot be applied anymore in a complex world as it is today.
Thank you, Doctor. Let's come to Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which the foundation stands for many things. And one of the most important ones that is unique to the German political foundations, its conventions of the importance of political parties for political systems and society. Our parties are an old-fashioned means for social compromise. Do they deserve a better image and more popularity among the global young generation?
Thank you very much for this question, particularly since you posed this question to someone who is a representative of a political foundation which is closely affiliated to a political party. And for us in Germany, the role of the political parties is even written down explicitly in our constitution. In Article 20, it is written that political parties should play an active role in shaping the political discourse in Germany. And despite the fact that indeed we are far away now from one-party rule or party coalitions, now we have a three-party coalition. That is true. The strength of the leading parties has relatively gone down, but still the political system in Germany is still shaped by political parties. And I'm a very strong advocate of having this kind of political party role also in other countries, because I think you mentioned, you refer to that it is maybe an old-fashioned model for political compromise. We do need compromise. I mean, you can't rule a complex society on just one person or so. I mean, you have to have compromises, and it is very good. I mean, politicians do have to decide on so many different, very complicated issues during a year. I mean, from health to security to economic development and so on and so on. I mean, you need to know actually whether there is a group of people around you that share fundamental things, fundamental ideas. That doesn't have to be an ideology, but that they share a common idea of how a society should be constructed. And then you can trust that your expert on health or your expert on economic development is actually also thinking in the same direction as you are. And you can trust this person that he or she is taking decisions, you put very complicated facts, but in a direction that is related to your basic beliefs and so on. And so I think political parties can really help to shape the politics of a country. And I would always prefer political parties based on common beliefs to a political party which is only there to elect one individual or bring one individual to power. And if he is not elected, then the next one will create a new political party. But these are not political party in the way I grew up in Germany. We have political parties that are based on specific beliefs. Earlier, decades ago, we would say left and right. That isn't the case anymore. We can't distinguish it in this way, but beliefs are still important. It's a bit more complicated than it had been 30 years ago, and that's maybe also one reason why the big parties have become a little bit weaker, but they're still there and striving.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Friedrich, you have been head of Department of the CAS's work in Sub-Saharan Africa since 2018, and you took on that role at a very important time when there was growing political interests within the German government for a better and stronger relation with Africa and its countries. If we think, for example, of the G20 Compact with African Initiative, Germany's Marshall Plan concept, or Chancellor Merkel's support together with France for the G5 Sahel initiative. How did CAS's work in Sub-Saharan Africa evolve since 2008? Sorry, since 2018. And how do you explain this growing interest in Germany for Africa? Last but not least question.
That is really true. I mean, Angela Merkel had Africa on the agenda, and she put it on the agenda in German politics, and that I mean also our former federal president Horst Köhler. He also was very active as far as Africa is concerned. There is a growing awareness among German politicians that Africa will take up a central role in our foreign relations, for Germany and for Europe. And if it was not for COVID or the Russian aggression against Ukraine, we would see much more of this also at present. I mean, you look at the first visit of Ursula von der Leyen when she became president of the EU Commission. I mean, this was to Addis Ababa and to the African Union, and that was not a coincidence. This has a meaning, and Africa is our neighbor, and we see this much more clearly now, and that is why German politicians look at Africa with more focus. And if I may add a development that we have seen since the new German Bundestag in 2021 came together. In our political parliamentary group, CDU-CSU, Christian Democratic Union, Christian Social Union, we have a working group on Africa. We had this working group on Africa for a long time, but now this working group consists of more than 40 members of parliament, which is for a regional grouping in the German parliament is huge, also compared to other regions. And last year, we organized, as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we organized a conference in Uganda, followed by a dialogue program in Kenya for this working group. And there were 7 members of parliament traveling to Uganda and Kenya. And when I talked about this in our internal meetings at the Adenauer Foundation headquarters, my fellow colleagues from other regional departments, they were getting pale because that never happened to Asia or to Latin America and so on. But it's not just a number. There is growing interest, but there is also a change of the constitution of this group. Before, many people who were interested in Africa were development aid experts. So they looked at Africa because, okay, it was part of Germany's development aid, and that was why it was important. The group now has changed dramatically. There are also still people who are working on development aid in this group, but there are people working in the defense committee, there are people working in the trade committee, there are people working in the health committee, and they see that for their expertise in the German Bundestag, Africa plays an important role. And that is a fundamental change of the view towards Africa. That's a very good change that we can see now. And we are now actually preparing to have an additional such travel project, and that will go to South Africa and Namibia. And there were 26 out of the 40 plus people from this Africa working group who applied for this. And the head of the Africa committee had actually the trouble that he had to explain to many of his peers, well, we can't take you with us on this trip. So the interest for African developments and for Africa is there, and it's growing, and I think that's a wonderful development.
Thank you so much. So we have concluded our panel. I will pass by to Mr. Müchler.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Jerusalem, and thank you so much to all our panelists. That was very exciting. That was very broad. We tried to look to some of the trends in the coming year. There's a lot of resource assembled here, and we thank you very much also to our audience to be patient with us. And I think we should now give a very, very big hand, and maybe 3 or 4 more to our panelists. Thank you so much. All right, I will now, yeah, sure.
Now he wants to give his final remarks, but I didn't see that coming. But I step in for a little moment. Benno, this will be your last event as head of the Ethiopian office of CAS, and you know, I would have loved to see you continuing the task a little bit longer, but it is your call, and I fully understand. It was briefly after I assumed my current position, as you mentioned, in middle of 2018, that you applied for a vacancy, which was not Ethiopia. He applied for a vacancy that we had in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And you assumed office in Kinshasa as head of the CAS office in January 2019. And with full engagement, full of new ideas. And what I found particularly impressive was the work that you did with scholarship students. And today we also have many scholarship students with us, since we have this network meeting these days as well. And then we had a vacancy again. And it was only in our not really yet opened and registered office in Ethiopia, with the country project and the activities we wanted to establish with the African Union. And that was actually only 2 years later. So usually our resident representatives stay like 3, 4, maximum 5 years. But I called on you and asked you, wouldn't you be prepared to go for us to Ethiopia? And you said yes. And I was very happy about that, because of your prior experiences working here in Ethiopia. And therefore I wasn't that surprised that you assumed also this posting. And again, with incredible engagement, with networking all around the clock. And despite all the difficulties and challenges, you set up this office, found wonderful stuff, which is around here as well, there. And you established CAS as a household name in Ethiopia, at the country level, but also at the AU level. And we see this today also at this event. But we could also see it in Berlin with the delegations you accompanied to Germany, and 2 of the members of parliament who visited just recently Berlin are present here tonight. And that was also very impressive and a very good opportunity to also see your working. And I mean, this was already in the final month of your stay here, and you didn't give up, and you just said, yes, we have to do this, and this is a wonderful thing. And not to forget, among the challenges, since there was no immediate replacement for you as resident representative in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you were leading the Congo office in parallel of setting up the office here in Ethiopia for 8 months, which I still feel bad because to give you all this responsibility, but you did it so well and was really wonderful. And that in times that were not easy at all. I mean, we mentioned COVID, and that was also affecting your work in Congo and here in Ethiopia, and the Tigray conflict, which has also been mentioned today. I mean, all this insecurity, that is also certainly a big challenge, and not only for you, but also for the people here in Ethiopia. All this in combination was certainly a lot to digest. Although you are still young and strong, I know from personal experience how hard it is to set up an office. I did it twice for Adenauer Foundation in Shanghai and in New York, and it is really a big effort. I mean, it is also something which is very rewarding, because everything you do, from buying a pencil to having seminars, everything is on you and the people around you, and that's also something very, very special. And you will wonder how, but there is one thing that you will experience as well. I was only 2 years in New York, so setting up the office and everything was fine and was going and set up, and then the fruits, someone else is going to pick them, and you will wonder how it's going on, and you will think of Ethiopia as well, and of all the good work that you started. We decided upon your succession. The new colleague is scheduled to arrive in August. But in the meantime, others will take care of the office. That will be a joint effort by Mrs. Hiwote Tadesse, our colleague Niels Wörmer is over there, and us in Berlin. And I wish them and us luck for the upcoming month. But here and today, I want to thank you, Benno, for your wonderful work, for the job that you have done, for all the efforts you put into this project. And I'm sure we will stay in touch. Thank you very much, Benno.
I take this one. Okay. Thank you very much, Stefan. That will make the speech now so much easier. Okay, but I will promise I will not take long. And we're closing in on the nice part of the evening. Thank you so much, and I will reply. Okay. All right. Your Excellencies, honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, dear scholarship holders. It is a great honor to address you for the last time as the country representative of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Ethiopia and at the African Union. Your presence and your interest in today's topic shows us that the decision to open an office in Addis was the right one. Last year, Konrad Adenauer Foundation celebrated the 60th anniversary of its international cooperation. Everything started with 2 offices in Chile and Venezuela. By today, we have offices in more than 110 countries. Addis is one of our newest, and if I may say so, from my perspective, it is the most important one that we have in Africa due to the importance of Ethiopia and the African Union. It was less than 2 years ago that we started our operation here in Addis, something that got delayed due and by the COVID pandemic. We quickly set up our infrastructure, we built a team, and now we deliver events and knowledge products to support democracy, the rule of law, social market economy, and human rights as we do around the world. We foster political dialogue and expert exchanges with and for the Ethiopian and African community. And we provide scholarships to support some of the finest young people here in Ethiopia who do extremely well in their academic studies and also bring forth a high level of social commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely proud of our local staff in Addis who made all this possible, despite being very small in number and despite a country representative who has difficulties to not work when it comes to Africa, Ethiopia, and the relations with Germany. And therefore, my first thanks must go to them. Thank you very, very, very much. Ms. Hiwote, Mr. Mesfin, there they are at the back. Don't hide, Mr. Alemno and Ms. Bettel. My thanks must naturally also go to our magnificent partners here in Addis who support us with their insight, their expertise, their political advice and judgment, and of course also with their manpower whenever we join hands to organize events and studies together. The hard work we invest and the long hours that we spend at our computers, in meetings and on administration are worth every second when we're able to organize events and exchanges as we do today. I will miss traveling the African continent and the rest of the world here in Addis Ababa by going from embassy to embassy, engaging with the diplomatic, political, and economic community here in Addis. And I will miss the good conversations with all of you, which includes, of course, also the Ethiopian counterparts and colleagues here in the Ethiopian capital. Serving as a country representative of Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Africa has been very special, and it will remain something very special to me. It was in Africa, in particular in Ethiopia, where I started working as a very young person 10 years ago. Coming back to Ethiopia at a very different time and making a small political contribution has been a great, great honor and an experience that I could have never imagined when I first visited Ethiopia in 2012. Building the relations with the African Union after being very much concerned with Africa over the past 10 years, a time that coincided with Germany strengthening its relations with the continent, goes in the same vein. Now, when I close this important professional and personal African chapter of my life and return to Germany, I'm very confident to say that there is much more to expect for and from here in Addis Ababa. It is with joy to know the conduct of our office in the hands of our project manager, Ms. Hiwote Tadesse, and also of my colleague Niels Wormer over the next 6 months until the new representative will arrive from Germany. Last but not least, dear Stefan, and now I reply. As I said before, it has been a very great honor to work for CAS in Africa. And I'm saying this as an alumni of the foundation and also as someone who believes very much in the importance of the political foundations and of course also of political parties for democracy and society. I would like to thank you, the entire team of CAS in Germany, and many of them are here also, for all the trust and the support that you gave me over the past 4 years. And yes, they were not always easy, but we managed. Many papers. Sorry. Multitasking is still a challenge, but we never stop learning. The time with CAS will remain something very special and something I will always look back to with great feelings. Thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, once again, on behalf of Konrad Adenauer Foundation, it has been a great honor to work with you. And I now wish all of us a very nice reception and good moments together. Namaste Genalo.
Thank you, Mr. Benno. On behalf of the CAS Ethiopia scholarship holders, actually first round scholarship holders, we would love to thank Mr. Benno Müchler for his help, for the friendship, and for the leadership we have. So I am going to bring a little bit for the memory, a little bit gift for the memory. It's from the CAS scholarship holders of first round. Please, everyone, stand up. Okay, Mr. Benno, we are very happy to have you. We are very thankful for your support and everything you have done for us. This is a small one. I wish you can open it and everyone can say. So, it's good watch. Yes, we are gifting Mr. Benno the Giz watch. The numbers are written in Giz numbers, which is one of the ancient languages in Ethiopia. We are giving him this gift because it's not because he's not punctual. He's very punctual, and then he uses his time effectively. And we have learned a lot from him through our conversations online and through our visit in Awasa. So thank you. And then I hope you will love the watch and then you will learn the Giz numbers very well. Thank you, everyone. Please have a seat.
Thank you very much. And I think we can start the reception, right?
Yes, we can start our reception. Everyone, enjoy your night.